Always coming out of Dublin, particularly Dublin South County Council, up there. And so these are former council houses. So obviously they must have been sold to farm developers or whatever, vulture funds or whatever. And they're selling them back to the state or leasing them to the state, I suppose, for social housing. Now, before anything else, the way I see the housing crisis in this country, and the way I see of fixing it, is to do it as years ago. Social housing, council housing, local authority under the local authorities in that area. If it's a Mead, it's in the local authorities Mead. That's the way you do it. Years ago in Cavan, if you walk around Cavan town, big estates were built in the 70s and the 80s. And I mean, ridiculous summer housing, maybe 4,000 maybe house in around the whole of Cavan town, just for example. Where the council had people on the county council building them houses. Back in the 60s, actually could have been the 60s, 70s. Huge estates were built. And there were all council houses. Majority houses in Butler's Bridge here were all council houses, and people bought them over time. People built up the family here, and they bought the houses off the county council. But they wouldn't sold to developers or anything, that they were used for people, and if they wished to buy them off the estate instead of having to pay rent every week, then they could do so. But nowadays we see that they buy the council houses off the state and then sell them back to them. Again, this is insanity. If you ask me, it's insanity. Especially nowadays, it's insanity. It is really, really insanity. We see these big fortune funds buying up huge housing estates, and then they probably will sell them back to the state, and we have seen that many times. But years ago, I wonder where they got the money. Really, really, I do wonder in the 70s and the 60s, where Ireland was a lot poorer of a country, had no money in it. How they could afford to build a huge amount of houses. Like in an estate in the town, one estate in the town, there's nearly 200 houses that were built in less than 5 years. Well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was 7 or 8 years, it could have been that. It basically was in very little time, in other words, in comparison to how quick we're building some houses now. But again, loads of people say that the regulations wouldn't dare, the housing regulation, insulation, things like that wasn't a thing. That wasn't even, it existed at the time. But they were just rapid building of houses, and obviously there were some faults in some houses and things like that. But the majority, a lot of people were housed over it. There was a lot of people housed because they were just rapidly builded and were rapidly builded. Like Butler's Bridge, for example, really started to take off in the 60s, late in the early 70s. Huge amount of social housing was built. Many people who were in the local area who had old houses, gifted up their land to the local authorities, and then the local authorities knocked the old houses, and built houses, and they were able to get the houses and pay rent to the county council, and eventually they were able to pay the county council to own the house and not have to pay rent, so they owned the house. It's the same with every council house. You can buy it off the whole county council yourself, and keep it for yourself. Basically, have your own property out of it. I don't know how much it is, but it's so much, I know. But again, that's how it was. That's how it worked, and a lot of people were housed years ago from that. And obviously seen the huge industrialization of this area, and huge expansion too of this area, with loads of council houses, because the majority of these houses that are built in Butler's Bridge now, for example, are majority at the time and still to this day, were originally council houses, and that's to be totally honest, the majority, nearly 70%, are council houses. It's a very little private house. It was all nearly council houses. They were built on lands the houses were not before. And that's the thing. And that's how you, in my opinion, end the housing crisis. Again, we have to get rid of some of these building regulations. Obviously not the health and safety ones like ventilation and things like that, but the speed up processes, because it does take longer. Like this house here, this is the council house. This is a modern council house, one of the most modern houses in the county. And it's very warm, it's very cozy, but it did take longer to build than probably the ones years ago. This took about 7 months in total to build, but that's literally them been full on at it. So basically, I say nearly 7 to 8 months, as far as I can remember. But again, that's how we end this housing crisis. That's really how we end rapid council house. But years ago, the local authorities had builders, had plumbers, had people on the county council who were building houses. It wasn't contractors who went there. Nowadays, if you want to fix a pothole or everything like that, there's a contract. This is ridiculous. But it's just privatisation. They just want to privatise everything. They don't want anybody in the state doing anything at all. They want everything just privatised. The same with the HC, so like they privatise it. Just because they won't have to fund it. And then obviously we have to pay for private healthcare, and if that be the shit that we have to put up with sooner or later. But yeah, that's what's going to happen sooner or later. But anyway, it's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous.